My name's Tom Conley. I am the editor of Legal Cheek, and a very warm welcome to what I think is the second in a series of SQE focused events Legal Cheek is running in partnership with BPP University Law School. Now, today's event is entitled "What Does Qualifying Work Experience Mean for Students Hoping to Secure Training Contracts under the new SQE regime?" And it will feature speakers from Denton's, Foot and State, Knights, and of course BPP. Now, while I suspect many of you tuned in will be aware of the changes to how aspiring solicitors are examined under the SQE, we've got some students that have already sat their first exams. Fewer of you tuned in at home will be aware of the developments to qualifying work experience. And for those of you that are unaware of what qualifying work experience is, this is the 2 years of on-the-job training necessary to qualify as a solicitor in England and Wales. Now, this event will focus on these developments and how they impact you, as well as explore some of the skills law firms value in their future lawyers, and more importantly, how you guys at home can develop these. Now, before I hand over to Liz Ritter, a legal education specialist at BPP and a former solicitor at Clifford Chance, who's going to lead this afternoon's discussion with today's speakers, I'd like to point out a couple of features of the Hop-In platform. Now, I'm sure you're all very familiar with Legal Cheek events and know the Hop-In platform, but just a quick reminder that if you've got questions for the panel, you can submit these in one of two ways. You can use the chat function on the right-hand side, which some of you have already found, which is great, or you can use the Q&A function, so you can submit your questions there as we're going along. Now, this discussion will run for an hour until 5 p.m, at which point I will pop back on stage to bring proceedings to a close. There's no networking this afternoon. Now, at this point, I would like to invite Liz back on stage along with all the other speakers. Good afternoon, Liz.
Hi there. Thanks, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Liz. I'll drop off stage and hand over to you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you, Legal Cheek, as well, for arranging this webinar and this panel discussion. Really delighted to be here. So thank you very much. As Tom said, my name's Liz Ritter. I'm at BPP Law School. I'm at BPP Law School, and as part of my role, what I do is I work with law firms day in, day out, really thinking about managing that transition over to this new SQE regime. So I'm delighted to host today's panel discussion. I'm going to go to our panelists first in that case, just to ask you to introduce yourselves, and thank you so much, a fabulous panel joining us today. So I'll start with Samantha, please. Would you like to introduce yourself, and also Knights as well, for those that aren't familiar with Knights?
Okay, so I'll introduce Knights first. So Knights PLC, listed, well, professional services firm, not just lawyers, regional offices. I've been on maternity leave and we acquired some more while I was on maternity leave, so forgive me if I've got the number wrong. I believe it's 15 offices, and we do tend to acquire other firms throughout the course of the year. I'm training principal for Knights, former, well, still current employment lawyer, still got my practicing certificate, so moved into the HR team at Knights a couple of years ago. I used to be in the employment team there.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And Susie, can we come to you now?
Well, I'm going to pick up the same theme as Samantha. So I'm Susie Halliday. Welcome, everybody. I'm the Executive Director of Learning Development at Foot and State, which is a Southwest firm. I also used to be an employment lawyer and still have a practicing certificate. I haven't done that for nearly 10 years now. So Foot and State is, as I say, a Southwest-based firm. We've got offices Bristol, Exeter, Plymouth, Truro, Southampton, and Taunton. So welcome everybody, and look forward to spending the next hour with you.
Thank you, Susie. Gosh, we're pretty much covering the country today, aren't we? Nick, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, please, as well.
Yes, of course. And sorry for that outburst earlier on. I've got my daughter outside, so it had to happen just at that moment. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Nicholas Cole. I work for Denton's. Denton's was in fact one of the largest, it's the largest law firm in the world. We're a full-service law firm. I'm responsible for all the recruitment that takes place in the UK and Ireland, and that incorporates both early careers and experienced hire recruitment across all the offices that we have, as I say, in the UK and Ireland. I've been with the firm for coming up to 3.5 years, learned a lot in that time, and of course we're learning a whole host of new things now with the implementation of the SQE, which we're looking forward to discussing with you today.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Nick. And last but definitely not least, Lucy.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Lucy Wildig. I'm at BPP. I'm the joint head, or one of the joint heads of pro bono there. I've been at BPP now for coming up to 7 years, and I hold my practicing certificate as well. I was a commercial litigator before I came to BPP, and I still have oversight of all of the pro bono projects at BPP that we run there, and so use that practicing certificate on a daily basis.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, and welcome panelists, and thank you so much as well in advance for your time today and your insights as well. The way that we're going to do this, I thought I'm going to start off just by giving our viewers just a bit of a recap of some of the rules that have been out there by the SRA, and then I'll turn to you and I'll ask different questions to give some insights really in terms of how your different organisations are implementing this new regime. I can see that there's a couple of people saying hello in the chat box, which is lovely. Please do as well put some questions in as we go through into the chat box. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box as we go through today's discussion. I can't promise that we'll be able to pick out all of the questions just to manage expectations in advance, but I'll do my best to pick out some of those questions as we go through the afternoon. So thank you very much. So as I said, what I thought I would do is just start off with a little bit of a recap of the rules. And before I do that, just a quick note that the SRA website is actually a really good central resource of information around qualifying work experience, as well as the whole new regime generally. And I think somebody from Legal Cheek was going to pop in to the chat a link to the first link, which will give some information for candidates all about qualifying work experience in particular. So, if you want to, then feel free to follow that link or find it by yourself afterwards through the SRA website. So, a quick reminder about the new regime. It was introduced in September earlier this year, albeit with some quite lengthy transitional arrangements, and some of those transitional arrangements not only lengthy but a little bit confusing as well. So just a reminder of the current pathway, the one which we're all quite familiar with. It's been in place for a number of years, which is the LPC pathway. So with the LPC pathway, remember that somebody, in order to qualify, you'd have to have a law degree or an equivalent conversion course. You'd have to pass the LPC, and then you'd go on to do a 2-year period of recognised training, and that 2-year period of training is usually with one employer, and it's quite regulated in terms of what you do during that 2 years, and with different obligations on employers as well. So that's the route that everybody's familiar with. In terms of the whole change, the new regime, so for qualification now as a solicitor, there are those 2 centralised assessments that all candidates need to pass, SQE1 and SQE2. We're not going to talk about those today. As before, you still have to satisfy, obviously, the character suitability requirements from the SRA. But the final piece of the jigsaw is what we call QWE, or qualifying work experience. And I'm going to really focus on what those rules are about QWE. So it's quite different, really, to the current training contract. It's still 2 years, so on the face of it, you might think it sounds pretty similar, but it's really not. So the employer doesn't need to be regulated in the same way as you have to at the moment in order to be a sort of provider. You don't have to have 2 years with the same employer, so you can accrue your qualifying work experience with up to 4 employers. And there's no minimum or maximum time for those 4 periods of employment. It doesn't need to be over a continuous period, so you can pick it up, bank some QWE, go away, and then come and pick up some QWE at a later point. It's 2 years, but it can also be a part-time equivalent of the 2 years. Now, what the SRA says is that in order to count as QWE, what you need to do is you need to be working in a role where you are delivering legal services. Now, that could be a variety of different organisations. So it could be in a law firm, like the three law firms represented here today. It could be in an in-house legal team. It could be in a law clinic, and Lucy's going to talk a little bit about that shortly. It could be international as well, so it doesn't actually necessarily have to be in this country. So you need to be in a role where you're delivering legal services. And the other part of it is that the QWE must offer the candidate the opportunity to develop some or all of the competencies that you need to develop in order to be a solicitor. And what the SRA says in terms of that is that if, for example, you're doing one task repeatedly, or you're really only doing administrative type tasks, then that's not going to satisfy that requirement in terms of what is qualifying work experience. So a couple of other points. So the first point is, again, just to compare the training contract with QWE, that currently with the training contract, all those organisations have a training principal, as are some of the people here today. The training principal has to sign off effectively on somebody's competence, and they do that by reviewing somebody's training diary to satisfy that you've met the SRA requirements. But with QWE, qualifying work experience, any solicitor can sign off on your QWE as long as they're satisfied, again, that you've met those two parts, those two requirements I said before, that you've been in a role where you're delivering legal services and you've had the opportunity to develop some or more of those competencies. The test of whether you're competent or not is, in fact, that you're going to pass the assessments SQE1 and SQE2. So that's a summary of where we are with the new set of rules. I hope that's a clear explanation for everybody. You know, we can see, and one of the huge advantages, I think, of the introduction of this new regime is that it does bring so much more flexibility for candidates, but also for law firms. And it really, we are seeing it open up different pathways to qualification, which I think we all agree is really hugely beneficial for the market generally. We know as well, and some people who are on the line may be paralegals currently in paralegaling roles, so it really does introduce those pathways as well to people who are in paralegal roles who perhaps haven't yet been able to secure some of those highly competitive training contracts. So we really do see a lot more flexibility opening up. And just very briefly, just to answer one of the questions, virtual work experience at a law firm. I think we're all working virtually pretty much at the moment. I know people are starting to come back. So, I mean, yes, it's if you're working at home, then that would still count as qualifying work experience as long as you are in a role that delivers legal services and that you're developing the competencies that go towards the statement of solicitor competence. So I hope that answers that question as well. Right, so I've talked, I think, for long enough about what the rules are. If you've got any particular questions, I'll do my best to answer them as we go through. But what I really want to do now is to turn to my panel and really think about some questions about to give the audience some insights into how your organisations are approaching QWE. So I'm going to turn to Nick first of all, please, and ask Nick. Just the first question is: when are you, or when is Denton's proposing to transition to this new regime?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Liz. So we've been thinking about this long and hard, and we didn't want to be an early adopter in terms of taking it on when it launched this year, but also we didn't want to be a late adopter. So we've kind of gone somewhere in the middle. We're actually going to go live from next year, which basically means that we'll be transitioning for our 2024 cohort. So those that we join the firm in 2024, they will then be expected to embark on the SQE as it is. That's not to say, though, if somebody has an LPC in that time, that's, again, absolutely fine. We'll honour that. They will just need to do the SQE2 alongside the qualifying work experience of 2 years at the firm as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And I might ask the same question, actually. Let's go around to Samantha and Susie as well, actually, if I can just ask the same question just to check whether you're taking a similar view. Samantha, I think it's similar at nights, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we're kind of transitioning from now. because we don't tend to recruit as early as Dentons do, in terms of we tend to recruit people once they've done their LPC. But we've got paralegals who are already starting to do qualifying work experience outside of a training contract. I know that's a later question, so I'll leave that one for now. But certainly we'd be looking at, when we're awarding training contracts, LPC or SQE, we'll be considering them alongside one another.
Lovely. And Susie, I'm just going to I'm not going to ask every question of all our panelists, but I think it's quite a useful one just to start off with.
Yeah, sure. We're similar to Denton's actually, so we're formally transitioning through the kind of traditional training contract route from 2024. So applications from now to start in that date, but similar again to Denton's, that if you've undertaken the LPC, you can do the SQE2. Our 2023 starters will be starting under the old regime or the existing regime alongside that. So very similar to both, but again, similar to Samantha, we'll have paralegals who we're supporting during the business under the qualifying work experience between now and then.
And in between, Susie, so but sort of before that date, will you be accepting or considering people applying if they've either got the SQE or the LPC? Will you be considering both types of applications?
Yeah, considering both applications, but I think we'll be looking to do for those to have, starting from 2024, to have completed the SQE. So probably similar to the others, we'll expect people to have completed SQE 1 and 2 before they start their qualifying work experience with us. And that can be done obviously with an LPC, avoiding having to do SQE 1 and just going straight in doing SQE 2.
Okay, thank you. I can see lots of questions starting to come in. I think I'm just going to ask a couple of my own questions first of all, if that's all right, and then I'm going to go back and sort of try and pick up on some of the good questions that have been coming in from our listeners. What I wanted really to do is to explore what QWE might look like at your firm, and in particular, is it going to look any different to what the current training contract looks like? So Samantha, would you be able to share with us what QWE might look like at your firm?
Yeah, well, we'll have kind of two systems, because we're not going to, well, not that we could, but we wouldn't want to stop someone who doesn't have a formal offer of a training contract at night from doing their QWE. So you'll have people who, like you said, are paralegals and they're doing qualifying work experience, but they haven't got any formal training at nights. And in that case, that's a discussion that will ultimately involve me, but is looking at whether or not their supervisor's got the time, capacity to supervise them and to make sure they're doing work at the right level. And then we're also going to run our training contracts. And even with qualifying work experience, we are going to still do seat rotations. We're still going to do, at the moment, we're thinking it'll still be 2 years. We find that the seat rotations are not only helpful from our perspective in terms of well-rounded lawyers at the end of it that we want to retain on qualification, but also for the individuals. So there are some exceptions. There are always going to be exceptions, but most people won't necessarily have a particular area of law that they know they want to qualify into at the beginning of their training contract. It gives them the opportunity to try lots of different areas. Even if they've got an idea of where they might want to qualify at the end, you can do complementary seats so that you can get a well-rounded view of the work you'll be doing. And I've also found people that have said, well, actually, I know that I want to qualify here. They do a training contract and then at the end they go, no, I'm going here instead, please. So it's always kind of, from my perspective, when someone says, no, I definitely want to qualify here, unless they've been doing it for a very long time, I tend to go, you might still want to consider the seat rotations on your training contract, rather than previously it would have been either apprenticeship or looking at SILEX route to qualification. Whereas now, obviously, the QWE opens up that flexibility.
Yeah, it really does open up that flexibility. And I know, I'll come to ask Susie this question in a second, because I know you're doing something, perhaps introducing something maybe a little bit different in terms of one of those seats. But well, I know from talking to a lot of law firms that most law firms are going to continue with that idea of that seat rotation for the reasons, Samantha, that you've identified. But certainly we're working with some firms who are actually going down a different model, where actually somebody will stay in that one area of practice and really be able to develop that sort of deep specialism in that area of law. So again, it's sort of one of the real, I think, advantages that organisations and individuals looking to those organisations can really sort of look at what's being offered and the training that's being offered and think about what suits them. Susie, I know that we were talking about this, and you're doing something maybe a little bit different with certainly one of the seats. I don't know whether you want to, if you can share that with us.
So a bit like Samantha again, not that we're copying you at all, Samantha, with our two things. We've got two ways that we're approaching this. The first one with our kind of open application process, which is like applying for a training contract now. Again, like Knights, we're looking to rotate for the very reasons that Samantha's identified. But as part of that rotation, we're probably going to look to do something which is not just within a legal team, so within one of our business support functions, getting some modules in around legal technology, really helping our lawyers to develop to be, or aspiring lawyers to develop to be rounded business advisors, focused on client solutions and not just legal tech. Not just legal specific legal
practice knowledge.
Practice knowledge, exactly that. And then with our paralegals, who will have been working with we're sponsoring, they will be more focused in their particular area, so focusing, not rotating around in quite the same way.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just, before I come to Lucy, I'm going to come to Lucy in a second, asking specifically about law clinics, but I can see that we've had quite a lot of questions coming in with very specific questions about whether, particular circumstances count towards QWE. Now, we'll do our best, but this is all new. This is all new to us, as well as to you. Obviously, we've been, keeping a very, very close eye on things, but there are some questions that I'm afraid aren't particularly clear at the moment, and hopefully will become clearer in the future. But just to sort of reiterate just a couple of bits of guidance which I hope will encompass a lot of the questions that I've seen coming in, that you can get your qualifying work experience through international, working in an international law firm. That absolutely would count. And again, so I'm just trying to flick back to some of the questions that came in. Again, the guidance. Yeah.
Sorry, just on that international point, that it's obviously the solicitor has to be qualified in England and Wales to sign it off. So depending on where that is taking place and who the solicitor is, might be relevant.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point, actually. Thank you very much for clarifying that, Lucy. You can have that QW again in different places. It could be international. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be in any particular order in terms of when you do the QWE compared to when you take the assessments. So some people will take the assessments before they start their QWE, and for other firms, they're quite happy for the assessments to be taking place during the QWE, which is actually what happens as part of an apprenticeship type approach as well. So I'm hoping that answers a lot of those specific questions. And again, what I would do is encourage anybody with other questions specifically on whether something classifies as QWE really to go on to have a look onto the SRA website. Towards the end, we'll come back and see if I can pick up any more of those questions. But I think I'm going to move on now, because I think one of the questions is around working in a law clinic or a law centre. And how would, this one comes to Lucy, please, how would qualifying work experience work within a law clinic setting?
Okay, so first of all, the SRA have confirmed that work undertaken in a law clinic where you are exposed to SRA competencies, or to some of those SRA competencies, can be classified as QE in terms of one of your seats. Having said that, just because it can doesn't necessarily mean that you should definitely use it. There's huge benefits, and I'll talk about this later, in doing legal clinic work and pro bono. But one of the issues that you see in a law clinic, particularly where you go to do a postgrad course, is the time frame that you're going to spend doing legal clinics. So we did a review of our students at BPP, and on average, it's about 3 weeks full-time equivalent across a year that a student is exposed to. So when you think in the context of 4, you can do QE at 4 different places, you're not necessarily going to want to use one of those up. So you can do it if you're going to, if you can show that you're going to get the exposure, but you need to really think about that time. And then I think we're going to come on to it, but whether as well the firms are going to accept that, because it's obviously, it is up to those firms if there's a role on offer, whether that can be accepted by then. There are obviously some universities and law clinics who are actively promoting QE through their law clinics. It's a little bit different where it's embedded within a university degree and you're there for a longer period of time. So Nottingham Law School definitely, and Sheffield Hallam have already come out and said they're definitely going to be doing it. It's embedded there. It's different, but again, I would say you need to think about that timing and whether the law firm's going to accept it.
So there's a question mark as to whether it's accepted as far as sort of meeting, being able to count towards your QWE, or count in a meaningful way, certainly towards your QWE. But that's not to say that there is huge value in engaging in the type of work that you would undertake as part of a law clinic. And Lucy, I don't know whether you want to give your perspective on this, and perhaps I'll ask one of our panelists to chip in as well, in terms of how you view that type of work experience. But Lucy, from your perspective, what's the value, do you think, of working in a law clinic, volunteering?
I mean, there's so many. I could literally spend the next 45 minutes telling you. But let's start from the SQE perspective. So across the second level, you're going to what's pervasive is ethics and professionalism. Now, those are quite difficult things to be exposed to when you're a student or when you're doing something repetitively all the time. In a law clinic, those are things that you're exposed to every time you meet a client, pretty much. There's always something that comes up, and it's really good experience there that you will be able to then put into practice in that exam. So that's one thing. Secondly, obviously access to justice is a really important part of our foundation in England, and it's with legal aid being so slim in England as well, it's really needed, and it is nice to give something back. And we have lots of students every year who qualify, go into training contracts at all different size firms, and then come back and supervise, and it's a nice thing to be able to do, and gives you extra exposure as well to other different types of law. And again, you can kind of try before you buy. So again, we in law clinics across the country, there are lots of different areas of law that you won't necessarily get exposure to elsewhere, and you might not, as Samantha said earlier, you might think, I definitely don't want to do that, and you might not want to spend 4 months doing it in a seat or something, but actually in a legal clinic you can spend one case, one matter, doing some welfare benefits, and you might find that you love it. And the nice thing is, within a legal clinic, it's all fully supervised, so you're never let loose on your own. It's all completely supervised for you to try it out. And then probably, finally, it's that putting your theory into practice as well. So, everything that you're learning in class, you're going to be able to put into practice with real life clients. That again, and I'm sure the others might corroborate, when I was a trainee, I didn't get exposure on my own to give legal advice until I was very qualified. And in a law clinic, you're going to get that exposure to the clients to deal with those issues that are difficult to learn. So when you get a vulnerable client, when you get an upset client, when you get a difficult client or a cross client, and how to manage those situations that are fully supervised, and there's stuff on hand to help.
Yeah, you're so right, Lucy, and taking me back actually to when I was a trainee, which was quite a long time ago, I have to say, and actually being completely terrified going into a law clinic and giving advice to people within the law clinic, because really I just hadn't had that type of client exposure. So really fantastic experience. I mean, Samantha, from your perspective, again, I'm assuming it sort of won't necessarily count towards or you can't necessarily look at it as part of qualifying work experience, but how do you value, again, the experience that people get, or what is this something that you're looking at when you're looking at applications, do you think?
Certainly, I think it's definitely, like Lucy's been saying, fantastic opportunities to get client facing. Because, I mean, depending on the type of firm you're at and the type of work that you're doing, you might not get much client facing time, whether that's on the telephone or even direct emails. And certainly, you know that if someone's done pro bono work, that they will have sat in front of clients, touching not alone, they might have had to deal with difficult conversations and kind of a wider variety and a better understanding of kind of getting to the nub of what the client wants in terms of advice, which is something that, regardless of the area of law that you're going to do, finding out exactly what it is that the client needs is the most important thing. And I think doing pro bono work starts you off on a journey learning those skills. Certainly the dealing with the difficult clients as well. Not that all pro bono work will be difficult, but certainly the situations that they're in could be very difficult, and it's learning how to talk to those people. Really, it's how to talk to people. I think one of the things that really benefited myself was doing work in a pub, because I got used to talking to people, obviously in a very different context. But the more experience you can get and the skills that you can build, particularly if they've then got a legal slant to them in terms of that contact with potential clients, is fantastic.
Great, thank you, Samantha. I'm going to just ask a slightly different question now. Actually, I'm going to come to Nick, if that's okay with you, Nick. Which is, you've told us as well that you're maintaining a sort of 2-year training contract style of qualifying work experience. So, what is going to be your approach to qualifying work experience that has been earned elsewhere? Maybe in a law clinic, or even more likely, I think probably more likely to be perhaps as a paralegal in a different firm.
Yeah, okay. So the way that we've kind of approached all this is to keep it simple. I think that's been our mantra throughout, because it's confusing enough for everybody as it is at the minute. But in terms of the way that we're going to look at it, we will accept experience from alternative firms, but we will be looking for transferable experience, the experience that you can expect to gain at Denton's, so you can take it with you, as it were. With regards to our paralegal population, the way that we're going to manage that is that we're going to probably take 6 months time to count as part of the 2 years qualifying work experience. And again, that's by using sort of meaningful work experience from not so much a like for like law firm, but just it's typical kind of experiences that they would experience at Denton's as well. So the answer to your question is yes, we will accept it. But I think what we're also looking to do is have people work within Denton's for a period of time as well, so they can get a feel for who we are, how we work, so that when they do eventually get to qualify, they'll be that well-rounded lawyer and ready to hit the ground running when they, as I say, when they qualify in due course.
Thank you. Susie, is it a similar position at your firm as well?
Yeah, it is. I think, and you can see lots of questions coming through the chat about, will this count, won't that count? I guess one of the bits of advice, which I think we probably all feel, is this is less about getting you over the line and getting you qualified as quickly as possible, and more about getting the sort of experience that will actually make you a good lawyer. So although the SRA has taken the approach that competence is determined by passing the SQE 1 and 2, I think for firms like ours, we're looking for people who will get really good experience during their training contract or qualifying work experience that will set them up for success. So it's not about, for us, and I think very similar to Nick, as Nick has described, it's not about how quickly can we get you through that, but it's about having the experience there. And I think Samantha, you're the same on that.
Yeah, we're the same in terms of the benefits of that seat rotation isn't about just getting you qualified. It's getting you as a well-rounded lawyer that's confident. I mean, it's not day one you're qualified, suddenly you don't get any supervision or help, but certainly it can be daunting when you're no longer a trainee, and trying to give you as many skills as possible and confidence for that first day as a solicitor is key for us.
So I think for any advice for anyone who's on here is, when you're looking at what you're seeking to rely on for qualifying work experience and you're going to law firms, think about the type of law firm that you're going to apply for, and think about the type of experience that they might want to see there. And for you as qualifying lawyers, that transition from trainee into qualification is always a hard one anyway, and people always feel like, crikey, I'm not going to, nothing's any different from being a trainee to being a qualified lawyer. But the better prepared you are for that with good quality qualifying work experience, the better you will find that transition, and the more effective and the better lawyer that you're going to be at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a question I was going to come on to later, but I think I'm actually going to ask it now because it very much links in. I think it's this idea of having a sort of portfolio QWE, so having bits of QWE that you've been able to accrue from different organisations wherever they might be. There are huge benefits to that, but I think it's really thinking, as you said, about what role do you want to have? What's the type of law firm? Thinking about it from recruiting qualified or newly qualified lawyers. What advice would you give to candidates who are thinking of putting together their bits of qualifying work experience in this way? Nick, I don't know if you can answer that one.
I think the best thing to do is to keep a diary, keep a journal, so that you are obviously keeping track against the requirements that are set out by the SRA. There are various tools online that you can now sign up for. The one that we've particularly like is through Flex Legal. They have a very useful online platform that you can use, or you can always use the form that's on the SRA platform as well. Try and keep it relevant. Obviously, we've mentioned that before, to the end goal, if you like. If you have a choice or a selection of firms that you want to end up in or qualify in, try and keep it as relevant to that as possible, and try and keep it recent. We've had quite a few requests recently for individuals asking for us to sign off work that was completed 10 years ago. And of course, that's absolutely fine, but trying to get the solicitor that remembered that period of time and for them to actually sign it off, it's quite challenging. And also, is it relevant to where we've now moved on, 10 years later, so to say. So wherever possible, try and keep it as recent and as relevant. I've used that word too many times now, but try and keep it as recent as possible. It's not always possible. We have people that have, moved away from the sector and returning back in again, and that's terrific. Absolutely, we encourage that. But wherever possible, like I say, keep it good track. Make sure it's in alignment to the SRA requirements, and make sure it's relevant to the end goal, to where you want to qualify into.
Thanks, Nick. And I think Legal Cheek, I think there should be a link that you have as well to how to register your QWE. And I think this was a question that came in earlier on the chat as well. So Nick referred to the SRA template. So there is certainly a template that the SRA has put out there for candidates to complete, to be able to register and record your qualifying work experience. So that is certainly one. And Nick, you mentioned Flex as well. I'm not actually personally familiar with Flex, but it's, as you said, there are different tools out there.
Absolutely, that's one of many. I'm not working on commission or anything like that. there are a whole host, and that's just the one that we know and looks good, and it's very user friendly.
Yeah, but I think it's the detail, isn't it? Again, thinking about the type of role that you aspire to, either as a sort of trainee or as a qualified solicitor. What experience is that firm going to be looking for, and how can you demonstrate and evidence the fact that you've got that experience is going to be really critical, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talked briefly about sort of paralegals in your own organisation. Samantha, I wonder if I could come to you here just to ask you about paralegals at nights. Are they starting to ask you about whether their paralegal work experience will count, and how do you approach those requests, and any advice that you would give to any listeners who are in that position?
Yeah, so I mentioned briefly when I was answering a different question, but tried not to segue too far, that we have had requests. We've got people who are doing the SQE, haven't got a training contract yet. They may or may not get one at nights in the future, who are saying, right, okay, I feel like I'm doing qualifying work experience. So what we are doing and this may change as things develop, is that they will usually have a conversation with their immediate supervisor. But at night, we've got trainee supervisors in each office who then are the go-to person for that office, so that they know people on an individual basis. So we tend to find that paralegals, because they're already having conversations with them, generally will approach them and say, look, I want to do qualifying work experience. I think I'm at the right level. It's then discussion between myself, the trainee supervisor, the individual, and the seat supervisor, if they would be, to make sure that we agree that that is the sort of work that they're doing, and that their seat supervisor is able and willing to sign off on it. And then it's much like Nick has said, it's encouraging them to keep that training diary to make sure that they're logging the work that does count for qualifying work experience. Not necessarily everything they're doing on a day-to-day basis will. So it's making sure everybody understands what is qualifying work experience, what isn't. And then we do still support certainly the solicitor that's signing off on that, and the individual as needed if they've got any questions. But they wouldn't rotate. It wouldn't be part of the training contract at nights. And I think one of the benefits of doing the training contract element of it is really when you're looking at qualification. We are going to be looking at the pool that have done the training contracts first and foremost when we're looking at roles on qualification, for all the reasons that we've already said about the benefits of doing those rotations. So there is still a benefit to doing the training contract, even if you've got a chunk of qualifying work experience beforehand.
Yeah, thank you. And when we're talking about paralegals, a question I could just see that is all paralegal work classed as QWE? Again, I'm going to be boring, but I'm going to go back to just, pointing you back to the, what the SRA says, which is that you need to be in a role where you're delivering legal services, and you need to be developing some or all of the competencies in the statement of solicitor competence. So what I'd recommend you do is have a look at the statement of solicitor competence and have a think about the role and what you're doing, and then think there about whether they do match up, because one paralegal role may be very different to another paralegal role. If the paralegal role that you've got is something that is predominantly administrative type tasks, then I think it's quite hard to demonstrate there that you're doing something that will satisfy the requirements of QWE, whereas other paralegals are doing substantively more than that in your organisation. So it very much depends on what it is that you're doing, how it maps against the statement of solicitor competence. And again, going back to the point that I think all of our panelists made, it is not only does it class as QWE, but is it the type of work as well that is going to help your end game, help you reach your ultimate goal of having a really great career in the law going forward. I saw one question that came in before as well. I'm going to ask this one, and I'm going to actually ask open for whoever wants to chip in to this one, if I may, actually, which is, do you think it's going to be just as competitive for people who are wanting to qualify down the SQE and QWE route compared to the current training contract route? So it was quite a broad question, which is why I want to sort of open it up. Does anybody want to take that one?
I'm happy to start.
Thank you, Susie.
Yes, I think it is going to be, well, okay, let me slightly rephrase that. Possibly less to get yourself qualified if you can get someone to sign it off, because you can amalgamate different bits of qualifying work experience, and providing the solicitor signing it off says, as Liz has just mentioned again, that it meets the competence or the opportunity to do those, to meet some of the solicitor competencies that the SRA has set out, then you'll get it signed off and you'll qualify, providing you pass SQE 1 and 2. Where it becomes as competitive is when you're then going for your NQ roles. And I think that, without trying to sound too boring and like your parents trying to get you to focus on investing in your future. I think the more you can think of it like that. So if you go for an NQ job outside of the firm where you've done or the area where you've done your paralegaling and they've got that all signed off, then people will be looking at your CVs. So they'll be looking at the type of work that you've done, and they'll be looking to see how that fits within your NQ role that you're going for. So that would be my take on it, but others may have a different view.
No, I have a very similar view, Susie, and so not to repeat everything you've said there, my only advice was don't try and shoehorn your experience. Don't try and bring up stuff from the past that you think that's going to tick off all the competencies. Really think it through, because it's incredibly important. It's going to be competitive, because we're opening up the market, the SRA opening up the market to a far greater pool of potential lawyers, which is terrific. It's fantastic. But of course, with that will come competition. So you just need to be mindful, again, just to regurgitate what we've just said, what your end goal is, and focus on that. Because if you're going too broadly, spreading yourself too thin, it just won't stack up. So I think that due care and attention, understanding where you want to go, what you want to focus on, will really benefit you in the long run.
And I think just to add, nobody's saying that experience that you've had previously or somewhere else isn't valuable, because all experience is valuable, whether it's as a paralegal or as a waitress in a pub or as a in a law clinic. It all brings with it its huge benefits, and it's just how you use it, as Susie and Nick have said, how you demonstrate that in your application forms for those roles, and when you use it for QE and when you don't.
Yeah, thank you. You talked just a second ago, Nick, about sort of different pathways as well, and I thought I'd ask as well about apprenticeship options, because this is something which is hugely growing. We've got loads more employers who are really starting to implement solicitor apprenticeship programs, whether it's those who've got a law degree and are coming in at graduate level, or those who haven't got a law degree, or in fact any degree. And this is certainly a new pathway that's opening up. Do you want to share a little bit about your approach to solicitor apprenticeships?
Absolutely. Well, we've really embraced it. We're now 5 years in since we first took our first cohort. We've now increased our numbers to 18. It's not as many as others, but more than some. And during that time, I think we are creating some absolutely fantastic lawyers, which really are. Obviously, the program is extended. It's a 6-year program, and those coming in through the door on the first day, they might not have much commercial experience, nor maybe not much legal experience. But what we do is we invest the time in them over their 12-month rotations, as they are, until they get into the last 2 years, of course. To really develop them, show them the ropes, get them to understand the commercial world of law, and all the other bits and pieces that we've been talking around as well, the kind of the O-shaped piece, the commerciality, the ability to hold a conversation, of course, with the clients, being human ultimately, and not just regurgitating technical knowledge, because that's, whilst it is very important, it's not all the be all and end all. As we move into the sort of the next stage of law, if you like. So the program itself has been a huge success. As I say, we're at year 5 now. Some may say some of our apprentices maybe are outshining some of our trainees. I mean, that's personal preference, but I think that goes to show that the off-site learning and the on-site learning and the blend of that is working incredibly well for us. And we're looking to extend that population across the UK and into Scotland as well, once they sort out the apprenticeship scheme up there too. So yeah, it's a terrific journey, a bit longer, but I think the value you get and the richness and depth of experience that you gain will put you in fantastic stead going forward.
I mean, you say a bit longer, but not necessarily so. If you factor in the time that it takes to perhaps get a law degree and then do your additional studies and then do your qualified work experience, actually pretty much equivalent journeys. So I know that we're working with some great organisations around apprenticeships at different levels, different types of organisations as well. So in-house organisations, local authorities, all different types of organisations who are offering. So I'd certainly encourage people listening in to keep a look out for those opportunities as well. Samantha, did you have anything to add on that one? I know it's something you're looking at as well.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think the law and law firms have been a little bit behind on apprenticeships.
Yeah,
Certainly, if you look at accountancy, for example, it's something that has worked fantastically well in another professional service setting, and I can certainly see it growing. We've got not that many apprentices. We haven't got as many as dentists. It's something that we've more so inherited on acquisitions and then go, actually, these work quite well. So we've started offering it more. I certainly see it as a positive. And hope that it's something that we can extend, and that we will see more people coming through apprenticeships, generally, not just in the law, but it is very good to get that practical experience early on.
Yeah.
We do still do the seat rotations as well, like Nick's mentioned. Okay. So you still get that breadth of experience, certainly in the last 2 years of your training in particular.
And it really is that blend, isn't it, of learning on the job and combining that with the studying that you need to do to pass those assessments. So it's a great way of doing it. Sorry, Nick, I cut across you there.
No, not at all. I just wanted to add that the apprenticeship versus the training route, there, it's not seen as a lesser entry into law at all. So please don't think that way if you are choosing to go down that route. It truly that is true. And
certainly something that I mentioned to paralegals, often teams would much rather have an experienced paralegal than a trainee anyway. So if you've got an experienced apprentice, someone that can hit the ground running, that's been doing it for a long time, they've got that practical experience. In some cases, I can see it actually, if there is any, there's parity. If there's a slight preference, it might actually be on the side of the apprentices, if either way.
And Nick, before when you were talking, you mentioned O-shape. So just for the benefit of people listening, do you want to explain a little bit more about what you meant by O-shaped, that reference?
Yeah, I think the whole landscape of law has changed dramatically over the years. I mean, the days where the lawyer can sort of walk into a room, make up a number and charge the client that figure for their technical experience, it's gone, completely gone. We need to be much more agile. We need to be much more commercial in our approach. We need to be business people effectively, and able to partner with our clients. And there was an initiative actually run by a chap out of oh goodness me,
Network Rail.
Thank you very much. I was going to say Royal Mail then, but thank you
No.
very much. So it's actually him that came up with this initiative to effectively cover off the areas that I've just mentioned there. So looking at not just the technical knowledge, but everything that comes around it. So adaptability, the ability to build relationships, and also to create value through legal initiatives. So it's really, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's having that technical skills mixed in with the softer skills, so that you can really, present yourself to the client and not just be seen as a technical expert, but actually understand the business and provide the value add.
And Lucy, that really ties in, I think, doesn't it, with what you were talking about before, which is all those wider skills that you need really to be successful as a lawyer. I think it really ties in. Yeah, I mean, do you want to just talk a little bit about what those skills are?
Yeah,
from your perspective?
Definitely. I mean, Nick's touched on a few of them already, and we actually use the O-shape. So if you Google O-shaped lawyer, you'll see there's lots of diagrams about, and they have all the different types of skills that you're looking at that Nick's just mentioned. And one of the things that we do at BPP is we align all our projects to the O-shaped lawyer. So we will say, in clinic, you're going to get exposure to empathy, to legal tech, to professionalism, all those different ideas that aren't just what you've learned in class, and it's those things, as everybody mentioned, that actually those are going to make you the well-rounded lawyer and the ones that are going to succeed. Because when you think about it in the bigger picture, those people that make partner, they'll have the legal grounding, but actually what's getting them there is their ability to make and keep relationships. That's what's getting them there, and the experience. The sooner you can start getting that experience, and obviously I'm going to plug pro bono here and legal clinics, because you can start when you're at university. The more honed those skills are going to become, because you can learn them.
That's right. And, the focus obviously of this panel discussion has been, qualifying work experience. But, as we said before, it's not just about does it tick the box for qualifying work experience. It's really much deeper than that. And thinking about, what skills do you have? What transferable skills have you got that you can demonstrate to those prospective employers? I'm going to ask a slightly separate question actually to Samantha. It was something that came up on a couple of the questions that I saw in the chat, which is more about the timings of QWE and compared to SQE. And I know that different firms are taking a different view. Would you expect that somebody has done the assessments or some of the assessments before they come to you to do their QWE, or is it something that they would do alongside each other? I don't know if it's something that you've formed a view on yet.
It's something we're still forming a view on.
Yep.
We've always said have finished the LPC before you start your training contract, and part of that is we want you to pass your LPC, because otherwise training contract and you don't pass it halfway through, that gets a bit awkward. But the main part of it is we have occasionally had people who are doing their LPC alongside their training contract. And the amount of work they have to do, it gets close to breaking them, because you want to give it all of your time to making sure you get really good experience out of your LPC and you pass that. But you've also got the workload, the kind of the mental workload. I'm not saying that you've got to work crazy hours, but in terms of learning a new area of law, meeting new teams every 6 months, really trying to make the most of that limited window. You don't have very long in each seat. And if at the same time every weekend evening you're studying and doing exams, it can just distract you from both elements. So from a pastoral care perspective, I've always recommended that people finish their LPC first, even though technically you could do them alongside one another, largely because you can see it almost breaking people. They can be an exceptional student and great at your job, but if you're trying to do both, you're spreading yourself too thin, which is something that we've mentioned several times in various answers to questions. So I think we would still take that approach with the SQE, so that people aren't trying to do too much at once. Obviously, if someone's doing the qualifying work experience outside of a training contract, then it's entirely their choice. But from a pastoral perspective, I might be talking to them about making sure that they're not trying to take on too much.
I'll come to Nick and Susie in a second, but I mean, I think from our perspective as well, just do not underestimate what the amount of study that you'll need to do to pass SQE1 and SQE2. I think the insights that maybe people have seen in terms of the first set of assessments, that they really are a very tough set of assessments, and it will take a significant time commitment to be successful at them. So something that it will be very challenging to do that. I mean, people do it alongside working, and that's part of the apprenticeship model, but it's definitely very challenging. Nick, similar in terms of Dentons? Are you, is your preference for people to do the assessments before they join and do the qualifying work experience?
Yeah, we're probably going to front load the exams, just because we feel that somebody joining that hasn't perhaps got a law degree, coming in completely cold to do QWE and then do the exam, it just doesn't feel quite right. I think we'd be setting people up for failure, and we don't want to do that. We want people that are going to come through the doors to be, wonderfully successful. So no, I think initially we will be supporting SQE 1, 2, and front loading, like I say.
Yeah, and Susie, similar as well?
Yes, in relation to our sort of people who are new to us, those who we would be supporting as existing paralegals who will be supporting, they'll be continuing to work. Obviously, we'll talk to them about what that looks like from an hours perspective. So the expectation is they would continue to work alongside, but absolutely similar to Nick. So those that are kind of main program of active recruitment outside of existing paralegals will be front loading.
So it certainly is possible, and I know lots of firms are doing it. Yourselves including, in terms of supporting paralegals who are working but wanting to study at the same time. But it certainly is a challenge. It will certainly be a challenge. I'm really hugely conscious of the time actually, and we're pretty much there in terms of timeout. I've again seen loads of questions coming in around, the different questions around QWE, and again, what I'd do is just encourage people to go and have a look at the SRA website. The SRA has also done a couple of different webinars. So I think, Lucy, you've posted up there a webinar about the law clinics and QWE, but I know that there's also a separate webinar that the SRA has produced with guidance on QWE. So to the extent that we've not been able to answer your specific questions, then hopefully you'll get those answers by having a look at the SRA webinars there. But what I'd like to do is, well, first of all, to thank our audience for listening and for your fantastic questions as well. And finally, what I'd like to do, of course, is to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for your insights and for your time of sharing those insights and thoughts with the audience tonight. So thank you so much, everybody. And I think we are pretty much there on time. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Liz. That hour flew by, but it was an excellent,
certainly did.
Excellent discussion. So thank you very much for chairing that. And again, just to repeat on behalf of Legal Cheek to the speakers, thank you very much for giving up your time. For those of you tuned in at home, there is no networking this afternoon, but please, we're doing more events with BPP in the new year. So please keep checking our events page where details of those will be popping up at the start of January. So there's nothing left for me to say, but thank you very much for attending and hope to see you at an event in the near future.